Started.
Go.
You didn't catch that on the record? Oh, whatever. So do you want to, so Clint's gonna walk us through, I guess, the, did everyone get a copy, a hard copy of the ordinance? Pass it
Yeah.
around?
So, oh yeah, those are the hard copies of the, yeah. And those have, it's fine print, so there's some comments in the side of dialogue we had. Yeah, as an intro, with weekly meetings, it's tough. You know, we get out of here by Monday afternoon, I'm sending in an attorney, hopefully to have it back so that we can turn around and meet the following Monday. She did not get a complete review in. She does want to have a peer review from another attorney, but she's close. Whatever comments or any things that you have, I have to leave a little early today. I've got some other commitments. But whatever comments you want to have addressed in this, let's try to get as many of them as we can. And I'll send that out to her. Hopefully, it's just more of we're waiting on some of her responses back. There was she leaned away from the 2 violation minimum. Short of the conversation, we talked a lot over the phone. And the concerns we both kind of ran into is what if it was an egregious singular violation? And then all of a sudden it says, well, no, if you haven't violated 2, we couldn't. Odds are there'd be 2, but she just felt it was over limiting in that regard. She did do some other work. She wants us to walk through it. We worked out a process where the officer can still cite the language in the ordinance, and I followed up with Dan after the meeting. Section 56 in detail says that an officer may fine a person at the scene. And so to go away from that, it was going to cause some significant revisions. And she got nervous again with me in our conversations as, why wouldn't you want your officers to be able to make that discretionary decision? They're there, it's bad, they know it. So the way it's kind of working out now, and the reason she wants us to work out is if an officer doesn't give a citation that day, it still goes to the chief. And the chief and the town manager can make a decision to do it after the fact because we feel that there was a violation. But she just didn't like the 2.
So how does that shake out? So what would be the end result of that? It would be,
Well, I guess which if the officer gives the fine, fine's there. And it's gonna go through the normal process. The issue that we ran into with her and talked with Scott LaJoy, is eventually you probably will have to go to court. So the way we're playing this out is that summons would be a local ordinance violation. And we would, if they don't pay or refuse to pay, we have our choices to run it through the district attorney's office, which could be problematic, or we could just hire our own attorney and kick the process over through the civil process. Longer, less likely to success. What I shared though is our goal is to improve the property. It's not about the fine as much as it is getting the property to correct. So if there's continued violations, we talked a little bit about the ability to waive. And if there's ever a violation and the tenants become egregious and the landlord's trying to work with us and they're working through evictions, we can waive the fines. Question, would we? Probably. Can I envision a situation where we would not waive fines on a landlord? Yeah. Same apartment, 15 different tenants over 15 different years, always causing problems. Probably not gonna be interested in waiving fines. You're gonna say, you keep renting to bad tenants, figure this out, but again, that's when that lever gets pulled or not pulled. I think that's where it's back to the discretion of the officers. When you go through it, you'll see all her red lines as you go through, and the comments I had on page 3 of 7. Is where we had the conversation about a complaint-driven process, and she's recommending completely against that. We said, do not make it complaint-driven. She goes, it would again limit an officer, put them in the difficult situation, driving around town, see a property, major violations, and then they don't have a complaint.
or wait for the phone to ring, or they
So they gotta wait for it, or they gotta
Yeah.
go elicit a complaint.
Yeah.
So they're like, don't, she goes, I would recommend against that as well. The last one you'll see in the emails, we had a brief discussion, came up in here about the rental, we have a rental registration. And the question was, could a person ever, came up in other things, could you ever, by ordinance, get rid of a rental property? And you really can't. If it's zoned and allows it, you allow it. But the question is that a person could lose their rights. She wants a rewrite. If you're gonna go down that road, it's gonna be a rewrite of the rental registration. It's probably gonna have to be, go down the road of a rental license. Because a registration isn't something that, we're asking to register, a license is a requirement. I think it gets. I see the pros and cons, but it becomes problematic, because now we're licensing something. And it could get a lot harder, but again, that lever was discussed in here. I'm going back to my original memo, the levers that we could pull, that goes back to some of those original ones. I think she's leery of it as well, but she did say, that if you wanted to go down that process, we would need to look at that ordinance as well. So short of, Dan, I'll kick it over to you now.
Yeah.
The edits are there. Like I said, she's waiting on a peer review. And she had a couple other pieces she just wanted to work out with them, but they're all self-evident when you go down through it.
Okay, yeah, that's, so the email that Clint forwarded to us this morning, and this is 4th of July week, and 9 AM meetings every Monday around the 4th of July are a challenge, so thank you for sticking with us. I know it's a challenging pace, but Clint got us back to us this morning. And I forwarded it to everybody. Did we print the email for people too? We didn't print that though, did we?
I didn't print it. I forwarded the email. I've got it here to read if people want to go over it, but
Yeah.
no, I didn't print it.
I would like to go through what the attorney had suggested, so people have access to it. It came through at 7:13 this morning. Early bird gets the worm after the holiday weekend, so thank you. But it was, in this version, this is from, what's the attorney's name?
This would be Lisa Krasinski.
Lisa. Lisa tells us, reviewed the version, changes, sent back and weighed in on the comments she left. Additionally, I understand the committee questioned whether a violation should be a minimum of at least 2 of the items listed, and that you requested our thoughts on this. So the thoughts were no, right? Are we comfortable with that feedback from the attorney, that leave it at 1?
Then there's still the officer's discretion.
Right.
On top of that, correct?
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hey, Brian. We're just starting the review of the rental unit registration. That's the hard copy. No, that's the rental unit registration. I'm sorry. This is the hard copy.
Another one?
Yeah, I need one more, I think. Can we have one more?
Oh, back that way.
Okay, thanks.
I'll find it.
I don't love taking the police chiefs. That's the rental registration.
Okay.
Yeah.
I looked at it quickly.
Yep. Yeah, you're gonna pull it up and then we'll send it back. Okay, Brian's gonna pull it up. So we just talked about, last week, we talked about, we're going through the email from the attorney that, from Lisa, that Clint shared with us this morning at 7. And again, our goals for today's meeting is to really kind of be comfortable with this ordinance. And then kind of talk through what the process would be as we understand it. We're behind on the communication stuff this committee needs to do, but as of next week's meeting, which is Monday, the 14th, that's our council meeting. So on our agenda for the council meeting that evening, we have an order calling a public hearing on this ordinance change. So we'll have, as I envision it, this committee will finish its work on this particular ordinance today and next Monday. And we'll go into, that'll get presented to council as a presentation item at the start of our meeting. And then later on in our meeting, we'll have an action item where we'll call a public hearing. The council would vote to call a public hearing for 2 weeks later, or at our next council meeting. I think that's the schedule and sequence on this ordinance change. So the stuff that we bring in and council is certainly within its, would invite comment from the broader community, and there'd be opportunities for discussion and changes from, based on what we hear at the public hearing. And it tends to, I wouldn't be surprised, and I'd expect and ask that counselors weigh in, help us work to improve what we come up with as part of that process moving forward. But so that's the goal of the next 2 weeks, and we definitely have to have the basis of a communication strategy or format in place for this committee. And Gracie, are you with us today?
Yes, I am.
Gracie? So,
Coincidentally, I just got my rental registration packet from the town, so.
nice.
So they obviously have to keep to their schedule. They just-
Yeah,
It's too bad we're a month behind, I guess, because it could have gone up with that,
we
but.
should have met twice a week and didn't do that, but
Yeah.
We debated it.
yeah. Yeah, the rental registration. So the question of the two items, so we're gonna agree with the attorney's recommendation that it not be two items to be a disorderly activity. It'd just be the one with the understanding that the officers have discretion. Are we comfortable with that? Okay. Or anybody uncomfortable with that is probably the better way in terms of getting consensus in these, meetings. The next point, well, there's several points about that. We have more work to do to complete the question from officers issuing fine to tenants while on the scene. So Clint talked, as we discussed, we'll be in touch with you about that. She recommended we kind of work through this as a committee to kind of talk through, and we'll ask Dan to help us kind of lead that discussion, but what's an incident look like in terms of response? And I think that would be a good chance to frame out what the communication document would be, some elements of that communication document. So we'll do that after we get done working through the ordinance. And then simple enough so the public can understand it, not burdensome to enforce. I like that. Finally, we'll have, hi there.
Am I here for this meeting or?
No, I think you're welcome to, anyone's welcome to
Oh,
join.
no,
This is
fine.
this is the Good Neighbor Committee. And so we've got 1 o'clock to talk about the Orono Festival Day, right?
Okay, I'm early.
Yeah.
Thought I was late. I was texting you like.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I missed it. But yeah, we're 1 o'clock at Orono Joe's to talk about the coordination of the Orono Festival Days.
Okay.
Yeah, good to see you. Okay, then this point about raising fees or pulling rental licenses. So we don't have licenses now. You don't have
Yeah.
a license.
We have a registration only, correct?
No.
No license.
So that feels like it's probably a long, down the road conversation. And if that's something we think we need to entertain and doesn't feel like a lever that we're as ready to pull, it's definitely not easy to pull. And
Couple things about that.
yeah,
So, one, you get a lot of folks who invest in Orono, who have properties all over the place. They're larger, right? You big name in Bangor, everybody knows, for example. You're gonna get tons of resistance from folks like that, like legal resistance about licensing, because other committees may not do it. Two, if I'm an investor and I can pick which community to buy properties in, I'm not gonna buy properties in a community that forces me to get a license because it increases the risk level of my investment, right?
Yeah.
And so you think about how markets work. If Old Town and Bangor get investor money and Orono doesn't, what's gonna happen to your assessed values, right? You can assess the value of whatever you want, but if you're assessing it at twice what investors you're paying, you're gonna get more challenges to your assessments, and then you got a revenue problem, right? Three, if you get a landlord who's bad, and they got 50 properties in Orono, and they mess up and lose their license, you might have 45 of those properties have great tenants. Is it fair to them that their landlord lost their license? And now they can't renew leases and continue to live in a place they've lived for years? So that's a huge mess. I would take that, throw it right in the trash.
Yeah.
Super bad idea.
is there, without a license, is there a process, like, we're gonna have this process with the disorderly property that's involved and have some pretty substantial fines and expectations.
I think the nuance is if you have a bad renter, a bad landlord. And registrations are coming around and we've known it, we've had a particularly bad year. They might get a different letter than everybody else does at the registration timeframe.
Yeah.
Saying, it's been a bad year, you're on notice. We just got done, 75 times we had to send police officers to that one residence. We're not doing that again this year. You gotta clean that property up kind of letter. And we kick it off the attorneys. I mean, can we, it's just kind of just that much more of being a good owner.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you say. It's kind of a good owner letter saying, this is not your normal rental. You're very different than all the others. Please see what you can do, work with us, that kind of thing. But I mean, as far as the license, I think it gets overly cumbersome to us to do the license. It gets harder when how you're gonna license a multi-unit. And again, I know everybody's treated the same, but it's a little different when you got a 2-bedroom duplex and an 800-unit complex. It's different. I know renting is renting, but it's not the same. So how do we treat those? How are we gonna deal with them? You would never be able to pull a license, in my opinion, on an 800-unit complex for 2 or 3 bad apartments. That's just not gonna work.
Well,
But
it'd be
you know,
Chances are they have attorneys on staff that look themselves.
Oh, gosh, yeah. And and they have, some of them have paid security on site, so it's different, it's a little different. So I think we're doing a good job of
Yeah.
being fair.
Point to add to that, Clint. So I think with all the everything I saw in here looks great, all these fees and the focus on trouble properties. I think just kind of the scope of this committee was to solve problem properties. I think you're solving it with the stuff. The licensing thing is way out of scope, number one. Number two, just to kind of cap off what I said before, capital goes where it is treated well, right? Orono, I don't know this. I bet somebody does in this building. I will bet you Orono is mostly investor homes. I'll bet you. If you look at the property tax base, a majority of the property tax base is investors, right? Want their money because when they buy properties here at higher prices than what you valued them at, when you reassess in the future, like we did a few years ago, you're able to get property values. If investors suddenly go, I'm good, Orono's licensing, nobody else licenses me. Think about it from an investor standpoint. If your license gets put, let's say you got $50,000 a month in mortgages because you own bazillion properties. If your license gets pulled, you now have substantial risk of bankruptcy, losing your entire Orono investment. What intelligent investor on earth is going to voluntarily sign up for that when they can buy properties in Old Town or Bangor or anywhere else without that risk?
Yeah.
The answer is zero will do it. So I'm not trying to be forceful here, like chuck that idea in the trash. Super bad idea.
I'm not indifferent to the complications and the disincentive it provides. And ultimately, I don't think it needs to be a part of this this round of, but I am interested in, if there's a consistent problem property and someone's not willing to do business in Orono, we either, in the ways that we need to be able to, as a community, make it a lot harder to do business in Orono if you're not willing to do business with, with us in a way that's in the good neighbor spirit of things.
And and also, if you've got that example Clint just gave of somebody that's got 20 violations, they've got some substantial fines. So I would think also when that letter goes out about registration, there may be something in there, say, hey, registration's due. You're gonna need to pay your fine, whether you can get away with it or not. But I mean, if they're paid up, they're paid up, but still, I think we've got disincentives in here enough.
And I do.
Yeah.
As it's just the last thing, I don't wanna miss it, is to make sure when you look at this, because we went away from the size of the units we're registering to the number of people that are at the party to create the disorderly 1, disorderly 2.
Mhm.
So disorderly 1 is now less than 20. And then a second offense of less than 20, gets you into the doubling of the fines. But a disorderly 2 is more than 20 people in attendance. Well, because of the way we worded things, we've ended up that a disorderly 2, landlord would not get that first free pass because it's over 20 people partying there. And I'm not quite sure if you want to fix it or how to fix it, but the way, it's funny that we were going back and forth on the emails. We ended up that there's no warning to the landlord if the party is greater than 20 people.
Yeah.
So it goes right to a tenant and landlord fine for over 20 people. Didn't want anybody to come back saying, whoa, I thought we discussed the landlord would only get a warning the first time. Yes, they do, if it's under 20 people. it's over 20 people, they're not getting the warning. Yeah, it would take some crafting, I think, to figure it out, and not saying we can't.
Yeah.
I just wanna make sure we meet timelines and goals.
Yeah, no, I felt like we were comfortable with that as a committee, but, and I appreciate you calling it out.
Well, I just, yeah, she asked me a lot, she goes, as you're walking through it, I know you're about to do that, I've gotta go to my other meeting, and so I backed up, but I'm gonna go to that, and anything you jot, just good notes on what we might need to tweak.
Okay,
Okay.
great, thank you. Thanks for,
Final cap point.
Yeah.
So bad landlords that are causing parties and stuff like that, or aren't working with the town to resolve parties. The way that they don't want to operate in Orono anymore is the fines, right? Because
Yeah.
every investor wants a return. These fines doubling, it becomes substantial enough that you get a damage at return or eliminate damage.
Yeah.
So you already solved that. What you don't want to do, and I don't want to be forceful here, I just really want to be clear, it's a super bad idea, the license thing. Is you don't want to chase off good ones.
Yeah.
A license might chase him off, it will 100% chase people like me off. I'm out. I see a license, I'm out, you know, a bunch of other good landlords would too, because the risk threshold is too high.
Yeah.
To have your license pulled and have all of your revenue streams go away because someone doesn't like you or doesn't think you've done a good job, like that's, the risk threshold is too high. And down the street, I don't
Yeah.
have it.
so I was kicking around the idea and just to, you're talking about, I was kicking around the idea, is there a process, like a citizen initiated process where, you know, Brian and 9 of his neighbors could bring a petition and say, we don't want this property license to be a rental in Orono anymore, in terms of like, and I think part of me thought, boy, that would be responsive to community concerns.
Yeah.
But I think it's probably over, you know, I think we've got a really good opportunity with the commitment of our police department and our town manager and the, you know, our willingness to continue to work as a group to address these things in this frame rather than going down that road and introducing a lot of.
I think this solves it, honestly, because you're gonna damage that landlord's returns enough that they may go, this is worth it for me, right? And so I think you've solved it.
But then we've got to find a way to we got to find a way to be responsive to those citizen concerns and to get them, create that kind of incentive and positive feedback loop that, hey, if I call 866-4000, not 911, I'm gonna get the satisfaction, or, you know, there's gotta be some responsiveness to that. So we've got to lean into that space too, so we're not enticed to go down the road of something more draconian in terms of scary for investors.
Along that same line, something I think the town should stay, at least in their thought process, is basically, I would say that your problem is not with the local landlords who either live right in Orono or live in a close proximity to Orono. And I frequently get contacted about selling some of my properties. And the people that are contacting me are the ones that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
So you drive me out and I won't have any trouble selling my properties.
Yeah.
You may not like the people I sell them to.
Okay.
And I think the town needs to say, you know, how much pressure do we put on and where do we put it on?
Yep. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. Go after, yep. So. Okay.
So, on this ordinance, and apologies if I missed it, but I thought under 2053, we talked about having it be 2 with the criteria to kick it in. Am I missing? that?
Yeah, no, we had some feedback that it create in the email that Clint sent this morning at 7:13. Lisa strongly recommended against that for,
In case it's one big egregious, it's only one, but it's an egregious thing,
It's a
given
egregious.
the officers the opportunity to still.
Okay,
so anyone, if it's particularly egregious, and then we lean into the discretion of our police officers and then ultimately the manager and their review to have some discretion in these things.
I guess the other question I had, we kind of had put a pin in this, but the public feedback loop on this whole process.
Mhm.
What of this is a public record or public information if somebody's, you know, fines, the disorderly.
Yep, we got some feedback, and I think this is something we'll have to address as a committee. But we have feedback from the attorney that it's perfectly permissible to report these violations as a matter of public record. And I would imagine, and I think this is something we'll discuss before the end of this meeting, as our schedule and what our expectations would be if we continue to meet. We'll have to go back to the council and I guess ask that we continue to work. But some schedule of and get a report of from the town, what's been, how has this ordinance been utilized over the last 60, and every time we meet, I think it starts with, okay, what's disorderly property, what's been our communication, engagement, what's been our enforcement, and get a report. And that's kind of and anybody who's called in would be able to watch the committee and get that public presentation of what, so instead of it being like a dashboard on the website, I think it would be more in that, but I'm open to other
I
suggestions.
mean, there's two kinds of feedback, right? So the kind you're talking about is good. The council should be oversight, right? And making sure things are working the way people want them to work and things, but I'm gonna channel Diane here since she's not here. Right, she makes a call. There was an outrageous party. She just really wants to know what the outcome of that particular incident was. Right, is that a case where she could, I mean, I think once the fine is issued, it is a public record, so that's a case where she could call and ask.
Should there be a proactive?
Or should there be a proactive? You called in a complaint. I just wanted to let you know this was the outcome from the complaint. That's putting burden on the staff, but I think we should think through what that scenario looks like.
I think that feels like a significant potential burden on staff that I think we want to be cautious of. And, but I do think if it's public, should be able to call in and get the outcome. Again, I don't know who that goes to necessarily, if that's, but the other thing I wanted to add on is rather than this committee meeting and getting the feedback, why not put that in every 2 months or 3 months or something, just an update in at a council meeting, community development, here's an update, have a scheduled thing where we.
What's that?
Like just an aggregate,
Yeah.
Yeah, like whether again, quarterly, we hear in our community development readout in our town council meeting, because who's tuning into this, who knows?
Yeah.
And who's tuning into our council meeting, who knows? But I mean, that way it is a little more systematic that we do get readouts and you can go back and look, it was on the agenda on whatever quarterly. That to me would be, and maybe it's zero. I have no idea what it is, but it seems like that would be, this is again, not as publicized. It's publicized, but I mean, I don't know who tunes in.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful. Well, let's talk about that today in terms of what the next steps will be, but let's stick with we don't have anything in the ordinance right now, including a response back to the complainant, the moving party, or, so what is there? Dan, what do you think of in terms of, you're gonna get a call on a Saturday night or a Thursday night? What's your thinking in terms of, say it's Diane, Diane's not here and she told me she wasn't gonna be here, so, but we do all this work, we get her to call the number instead of knocking on a door, and she calls and your officers investigate the complaint or respond to the complaint. What's the right way that Diane, and knowing that Diane is not just calling for herself, she's calling for the neighborhood. I mean, the neighborhood, I think a lot of times when there's a particularly troubling event, many in the neighborhood know about it, and I'm not on the Webster listserv, but I assume that word gets around.
Get around on the listserv, yeah.
So what's
I think Diane also is calling to calibrate, right? She's very sensitive to, should I not have called? Right? So to her, that's positive feedback about I called and that the police agreed with me, right?
So what's the right way to, without creating a tremendous amount of burden on your team, what's the right way for people to get feedback after the fact?
I was just gonna add, so like, as an example, my son got caught with a fake license buying alcohol. And they posted it in the newspaper, like his name and information about what happened. So I don't, like, I think there should be.
Conviction after convicted or no?
No, it was like he had to go to court and stuff like that for it. But it was posted like my son was, you know, this person, age, whatever, and all his information in the paper. So I don't see why it wouldn't be okay to put like this rental agency got fined for disturbing the peace in
Yeah.
Orono. Like I feel like there's like, there used to be like a section in a, yeah, something like that. Like it would be like, oh, this person was cited,
It was for the campus. So there was a campus reporter that used to reach out to me. I can't even remember. It was every week or so. They would reach out to me on a Monday or a Tuesday and just try and get a rundown of what happened for the weekend. I think they still do it with
You
you,
still
man.
do it, yeah.
Now, they haven't done it with us in several years. So to your point, if something like that happened where, as we've talked about before, for our process, if somebody gets issued a summons, that name, address, and what they were charged with is all that there is for public record. So that's what we would give them. You know, we'd say that we got a, you know, whatever, they were at X business trying to buy alcohol, charged with possession of a fake ID. You know, that's what it would be. So that's the only, we've done something like that in the past. To some degree, I would probably maybe reach out to Lori. I don't have a system like that in place. I don't know how to close this feedback loop because I don't necessarily know what people want for information. And some people really want, I know, so this is the thing that I always think about. I know some people really like the responsive feedback loop to gauge their barometer, right? But not everybody does. So I guess I'd have to figure out what that system looks like. So I was thinking about talking with you, Lori, about, not to even put you on the spot right now, but like what the university's response is to people that make referral contacts to the university. Because this would be something new for me. So I think I'd have to think about it more about what does that system look like? How do we be responsive to people and let them know? And I think that some of this ties into, I'd have to talk with Clint too, some of this, the computer aided system that Clint's looking to also, where you just create a database for people to go to. And that can take some of the load off us. Where you channel people to, I don't know if it's the website or something like that, where you can find out what has happened as opposed to having to call us.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it would be either in the campus safety report or it would be in our annual reports that we would track things like that. So if there was, I mean, I don't think that we pull out those numbers right now, but if there were off-campus referrals to our conduct system, that would be an easy pull and report if that's something that people wanted.
How do you guys make a report if Chad, for some reason, just because he's sitting across from me, calls about a complaint or makes a referral to you guys on a Friday?
Yeah.
What's the feedback loop for you guys look like to Chad about where his complaint went? Like, how fast do you get a response back then? Not to like say.
Depends on what it is. If you called the police and the police didn't have anything that was it was a conduct issue, they would send it to conduct, and one of us, if it wasn't a clear conduct violation, somebody in the dean's office would call you back and say, tell me what's going on. Like we had a house over on College Ave that we were working with, that students were consistently having some issues, and the guy next door kept calling us. And so then, you know, and then we would call him and say, here's what we did. We called the students in, we talked to them about what this was going on. They were affiliated with another organization. We called their advisors. And hopefully this stops. If it doesn't, then let us know. You know, that's the kind of thing. But we also have more of an ability to do that, I think, probably, if somebody calls. Because we're not dealing with a particular individual, we're just saying students.
You guys get a lot of calls?
We get a fair amount, yeah. I mean, if there's a problem house that we know as students that comes up on our radar, we'll go and knock on the door and, hey, what's going on? You know, done that before.
Don't tell Lori. I mean, don't tell Diane that you're knocking on people's doors. No, I'm kidding.
Well, we do it in the light of day.
I know,
I mean, things are a lot different in the morning, right?
Good addition here. that you guys made, which is chief calling them to make a conduct referral. It's just another pressure point to get the students who are misbehaving to stop.
So I think the crux of the question though is, what is it people want back for information? What's the timeline and how do they expect to be communicated back to? That's what I would flip back to this committee because it's different for everybody. Some people are more than happy to go to the website and try and find the information on their own. Some people really need that personal connection. And so how do we want to craft that message? How do we, what do we want to set for expectations really for us? I guess is where it needs to go is what is the expectations that we would like to try and set for the communication loop to the people in town?
Well, maybe that's something.
Because I don't know, like we talk about communication in all of our council meetings, we
Yeah.
talk about it in all of our committee meetings. It's a challenging topic because newer generation communicates well through going and finding their own information. And some people, they're, more traditional, appreciate the phone call. And I know that, but.
I think what Leo suggested though is really reasonable. If you take a monthly council meeting and say, here are the calls, here are the responses, here's the outcome. But not necessarily about a particular thing, or even quarterly.
Yeah, well, some will
That
rise to
seems
the level though
reasonable.
where they are, and it's tough to decide what's, if the
Gauge your barometer, it's hard to gauge your barometer at a monthly meeting or even a quarterly meeting.
Yeah.
I mean, the aggregate data is good and it serves an important purpose, but there's this individual feedback loop. Right, and that ranges from, Officer Lesky is gonna get back in touch with somebody. Maybe it's not urgent, it might be 2 or 3 days, but eventually people are gonna hear. It could be, I have to want to know enough to call in, so I'm gonna call in. It could be it's on a computer system. Or, it could be simply an example of, it's just like the bad checks that you see under the glass at the counter or, in a small town. Right? I have to confess, there's a little bit of appeal to me in that aspect too, right? It goes back to the orange sticker in the Tucson ordinance. If you really had your blowout party and the police had to come, you're gonna live with the fact that everybody knows that for the next 6 months.
Yeah, no, we decided.
Born observer. Is that something you have enough?
I was thinking about the observer too.
Quarterly.
Stuff.
Yeah.
We're probably not talking about a lot of things. The number of these are gonna be relatively, I would think.
Right.
And there's, my hunch is, so Diane, using Diane as the example, she calls. It's likely she sees the police car roll up.
Right.
In most cases, in probably all cases.
Right, but she doesn't know what happens after that.
Right, I know. So, that one feels funny to me, like Mrs. Kravitz needs to know what's going on a little bit, but, just knowing that they responded is one piece, and if that's not enough for you, I don't.
I think they usually respond, right?
Yeah.
So that's not new information because he's very responsive and they respond, but like we keep picking on the hockey house, but the hockey house, nobody in the neighborhood knew that they had started the disorderly process back in October, right? And they were still having parties. I think Diane made the call in October and she felt like nothing happened, so she stopped calling. And then it wasn't until there was a massive party again in April that she called again.
Yeah.
And whereas I can tell you there were multiple parties in between, right? And if the neighborhood had known that there was, a police judgment that actually that party in October was pretty bad and it's hitting this ordinance, there probably would have been calls in between and we might not have gotten to where we got in April.
So back to like the police beat used to be in I think the Times or something. Is that just a matter of someone calling in and saying, hey, what happened this weekend? And can anyone do that? Or do you have to work for a newspaper or,
The newspaper doesn't have any more special rights.
that's that?
A newspaper doesn't have any more special right to public information than any citizen does.
Yeah.
So, they're all working off the same authority, a citizen.
So in theory, someone could call on Monday and say, hey, what can you tell me what official action happened? And they could get that information.
Visit no fine, visit fine. That's all public record, I think, at that point.
Mhm.
The newspapers publish criminal stuff, probably because it's of more interest to the public, maybe civil stuff, maybe. But the civil stuff might be of interest to Orono people because we have a unique problem here with all these parties, the place that don't. But newspapers probably won't be super interested in it because it's not.
It'd be nice if there was like when you your UPS or like when you're doing like a tracking number and get like a status update of like when your delivery
They're
is. That would be something.
They're spoiling us. They really are. I mean, it's amazing the kind of responsiveness you get from some of these, entities that make you think, well, it'd be easy for us to,
But what's gonna happen too, so you go to the phone call, people call in, you get Brian that calls in, you get Diane, like 4 people calling, not knowing that Brian had already called. Now you're inundated with phone calls, answering the same question, that's tying you up, taking your time away from doing something that might be more urgent or
No.
that's on your plate.
The Orono, much to my annoyance, the Orono Police Department Facebook following is twice what the town's Facebook following is. And I mean, in the Orono Old Town, there's like an Orono Old Town Neighborhood Watch Facebook
Yep.
page, which is probably. I don't spend time there typically, but maybe is there a Tuesday morning disorderly property, good neighbor report, and the police responded to and issued summonses or fines under this ordinance at these addresses over the last 7 days and see what kind of responsiveness we get. You guys kick that around in terms, 'cause I don't want you to have to like call back to everybody. Like if I call the kids down the end of my street, if they're having a little too much fun and they show up, it's like, all right, it's nighttime now, it's time to move this inside, and that's the end of it. I don't want you to have to call me back up on Monday morning and say, this is what we did. But if it resulted in, if you see the visibility, and then all the time there's a tagline, people, we had this, and if you have a complaint that, disorderly property concern, call 866-4000, because we're not gonna call 911, because you all voted last time. But if we had that kind of, I think it'd be less. I think it would serve 2 ends. One, it would create visibility about what we're doing. It would remind people, this is the number. And it would also show responsiveness to the concern without diving too much. And if someone's clearly got, an axe to grind is not the right term, because it suggests if someone clearly has a concern about a product and they want to call the department for more information, then that's a different story, and it puts the onus on them rather than, I don't want to create the idea that you're picking up the phone. I'd rather having your officers patrolling the streets for speeders than calling everybody up who's not expecting a call. And we just can't fund that that resource. Oh, we could, but yeah.
Taxpayers will pay for that.
Right, yeah.
Question related issue, so we've talked a lot about encouraging the public to call, which I
Yep.
think is great. I think we all agree that's great. Just from my experience, one thing we'll find inevitably for sure is you're gonna get some number of complaints that are not real.
They're not what?
They're not real complaints.
Yeah.
And I know this because probably 10% of the calls we get are tenants who don't like another tenant and are trying to get us to fine them.
Mhm.
I've had cases where people call to try to get a neighbor that we know for a fact they don't like,
Yeah.
fine $500, and they weren't home, they were home
Yeah.
for a month.
Yeah.
Nothing happened in the apartment. Okay, so that'll happen.
Yeah.
Right, and it'll happen because people try to weaponize the fines against a neighbor they don't like or against a landlord they don't like or whatever. So what is and again, that should be the minority of calls. The vast majority will be responsible citizens calling in a legitimate complaint. How do you protect against those? Is that the officer going out, finding no issue and saying
Yeah, if that tenant's not there. then
or
there's
there's no evidence that anything happened, now there's no fine, there's no
Yeah.
action because the officer's like, sounds quiet to me, I don't see, is that the protection?
I think
we get
so.
that, or
Yeah, I think so.
So I think the feedback loop question is definitely something good for me to talk about with Clint and Mitch and seeing. What type of a lift that would be for us for staff, because again, thing that we're talking about that we don't really know is. We haven't worked this ordinance, so I couldn't tell you right now how much
Volume,
lift
yeah.
this will be, how much of a volume dense this will create for the second half of my year.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe that's something that maybe it's something we talk about trying and seeing what the responsiveness is and seeing how much time it takes and then going from there, or, think that we need to be flexible in debating as to whether or not it's quarterly reports. Is that enough feedback? Is it monthly? Is it weekly? And then just continue to try different things, because we are trying to rework something which is new.
Yeah.
So I worry about 10 new things. Some things may not everything's gonna work, let's be honest. Not everything that we're gonna do is gonna work universally. that would be a perfect world. We just don't live in that. So we need to be flexible in how we
Yes.
work and report. So I don't know
Yeah.
that, if you were asking me, I don't know that this is something that I would bind in ordinance.
Yeah.
I think that's like something that we should work out with the Clint and the council to see what the feedback loop should be. And then we meet that expectation, because I know that there are other communities, I can think of a few that do that. They post their monthly statistics on their Facebook page. You know, I see the police departments that'll say we did this many calls for service, stops, blah, 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 blah. So is it something that's not being done anywhere else? No, it's just not something we've done. So it's just a matter of figuring out what that looks like and what works for us. I think for me.
That broader thing is maybe more, might be more relevant, because if this happens twice in the fall, that's not like a consistent thing where people are tuning in to see, like, oh, nothing happened.
Yeah.
Nothing happened,
Right.
nothing.
That's my
Is one.
concern, right? That's my concern is if you go zeros on zeros, you know, the summer, you go 0, 0, 0, maybe you get one, hard telling, again, don't know. I would expect the fall to be a little heavier than they are right now. So it's, again, how do you keep somebody constantly engaged and checking back
Mhm.
and looking for that information? I think that constant engagement is a hard thing.
Yeah. Well, I'd tune in if Cynthia's kid on the ID thing was on it. I would tune in for that too.
Years ago.
Important learning opportunity. And this is, so just, so the feedback we got from, that Clint got back from Lisa on the issue of the violations being public. This was June 25th. So we also understand the town had two specific questions. One, can the town create a public list of notice of properties, address, owner, et cetera, that are deemed to have violated, and if they had to pay the fines? The answer to this question is yes. On the first one, there was no prohibition on creating a list or otherwise making a public list of violators. The information is public record. The second one was about the licensing issue. And yeah, I guess we decided that that's not something we want to pursue. It's kind of outside the scope of what we're trying to do right now. So that's the feedback Clint got from the attorney, again, on June 25th. So it's definitely, the advice is no prohibition on creating a list or otherwise making public a list of violators. Now, with that, so it sounds like from that, the homework from that is to ask the chief to come back to us. And I don't know if you could kind of have an idea for us at next week's meeting, our final scheduled meeting, but what you think that would be as an appropriate first step. And this is so about trying, right? And there's no, we want this to be an iterative process that improves over time as we learn things. So we gotta be, we're not gonna hold anybody accountable to any kind of perfect solution. We're just learning and trying this together.
An appropriate first step for what was it again? Should I have it right?
The feedback,
Oh, the
on the
feedback, yes.
disorderly property.
Yes,
feedback.
on where things are going.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
I
if
mean,
it's,
I think that's great to let the staff kind of take a chew at it and see what they
Yeah.
think. But the other thing that we can communicate to the public is that if there's an actual fine, it's a public record. Right, so anybody who cares enough, I don't think this is gonna be a large number of people, but anybody who cares enough can call, find out.
And I think like, so I just want to put it out there too. I will say, even to my own demise, but like with the calling 911 or calling 866-4000. I would prefer somebody reach out to me, typically via email, because I can set them up in the queue. And if there's an answer to be asked, then reach out and I'll get back to you. It might not be today, you know,
Yeah.
but I will get you an answer with what I can. So if you're that type of person that really wants to know, and I can tell you, I can either say can tell you or can't tell you, or working it or not working it, right? So, you know, regardless of what we do with whether it's a weekly report, a monthly report, or a quarterly report, if somebody really wants to know what happened with something, just shoot me an email. Just make it easy. Just shoot me an email and I'll get back to you when I can.
Yeah.
I don't know many people that have said that I haven't got back to them. I'm not saying that I'm the best at getting back to them in a day, but I'll get back to you at some point to let you know what's going on. So for those people that really may need to know, I don't know that we need to get crazy about creating this system of places to go look. If you really have a burning desire to know, just reach out.
Cause I could foresee something happening on a Friday night, somebody's calling Saturday morning,
Right,
what happened
Yeah.
last night?
right.
You know,
Yeah, I can tell you that too. Unless the bottom falls out of the world or something really bad happens, if you send me an email on Friday night about what happened, I probably don't know. You know, again, that's the full disclosure thing too, is that if something bad happens, then somebody will let me know. There's a system in place for that, but, you know, typically these noise complaints, that happen in the neighborhoods, I catch up to them on Mondays when I catch up on everything else.
So I can foresee somebody calling.
back from vacation finally.
Right, 8 o'clock in the
Man.
morning, you're just
Right.
sitting down, you haven't even opened your email yet and, hey, what happened in front?
Yeah.
Well,
I know now.
and they'll call you back an hour later. I just can foresee that happening as well.
And I'll tell you though, you want a feedback loop or system that people trust to work so that they're emailing you instead of me, you know?
Right.
And that's kind of when they come to me, then, you know, then I'm in Clint's email on Monday morning and what happened and those are things that we wanna avoid that.
Yeah.
You know,
Maybe I'll say I'm getting a lot of emails, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I'll take that bridge when we get there. but
yeah,
For
no,
those that really wanna know, just send me an email.
yeah,
And there's nothing about this that's urgent, so I think, you know, even if it takes a few days, I
Yeah.
think that's totally. I think it's written fine and people understand that, so.
Well, it's setting the expectation with the talent people too, like, hey,
Yeah.
Friday, might be Tuesday or Wednesday before somebody gets back to you.
Yeah.
And to some degree, if we're looking at generating data and workload and stuff like that. Again, if I come back to, you know, again, Clint and the council in 3 months and say, I'm getting 30 emails a weekend. This is really busting me up. We need to do something different.
yeah,
Then we'll have to come back and have a bigger conversation about the load.
yeah.
But I don't know what the load is until I have a load.
Right.
But that would be, yeah, that's data that would be useful for resource, you know, and
So, from a resource allocation,
yeah.
couldn't tell you how much time this will consume of mine until I start consuming time of
Yeah.
mine.
But yeah, communication's a two-way street. We expect, if we're gonna ask our residents to play a bigger role in reporting when they need to, we gotta have some kind of way to get responsiveness back, because not hearing back, it's just, that's, I think, a lot of what the frustration in the Webster neighborhood's been over the years. Is that you have a meeting and people put on a big show and then what happened, what, you know, and
Like you said, when you hear nothing, you assume nothing happened.
Yeah.
You assume-
Quick question, not sure if this is off subject, but are we gonna try doing kind of social media or any kind of campaign of letting people know more on neighbor? We're kind of rolling out some new ordinances, kind of like we do with the school bus stop.
yeah, we absolutely will. So we'll
Did you get one?
frame that out. Cody was out last week, I was out this last week, and, you know, I think we'll frame some stuff up for us that we have to do. We did some work on defining what a good neighbor is. And we're gonna have the 2-pager and we're gonna work to get that, you know, the rights, the responsibilities on one side and the rights on the other. So we'll get that stuff together.
I have to step out for another meeting. at
Okay.
10, so I'll catch up about the other stuff, but I think that's stuff that Clint and I can talk about later.
Okay,
That's stuff that we talk.
okay, yeah, that'd be great.
All right.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you, Dan.
Yeah.
All right, is there any more thoughts on, you wanna just walk through this ordinance thing? I guess we're a little,
I mentioned earlier in this early property about the wording right in the beginning, right in the purpose. And I don't know, I read
where are you with the
Yeah.
ordinance, Dennis?
up in the purpose,
Okay.
section 20-50.
Yep.
Where it talks about eliminating the proliferation of property. I mean, the harboring, I don't. I mean, are we trying to eliminate rental properties in Orono?
No, so what is it, I mean, I recall you saying it, and I apologize it didn't get in here, what's the language you suggested?
It's the word proliferation, I mean. In harboring, I
Yeah.
don't, that doesn't,
Should be like shenanigans and tomfoolery.
something professional.
Yeah, like, yeah,
And if one of my buildings,
Dated language.
if one of my buildings sometime in September, October, when their first day, I have one little incident that I have to deal with. And quiet them down and it never happens again. Am I harboring somebody?
so it's gonna be behavior focused as opposed to,
Yeah.
that, okay, I'll work that up for next time.
I suspect that that's there for a legal reason. Does harbor means to give shelter to somebody who's committing a crime? And so I check with the lawyers. I totally take your point. It sounds really harsh. I suspect the lawyers put it there for a reason, so we should check with the lawyers.
You ever get a letter from an attorney? I bet you do. I bet, you know, it's just mean right out of the gate. It's like,
More often.
jeez, a crow. Pump the brakes just a little bit. It wasn't, you know,
Well, see, and because it's an interesting point to bring up, because he and I get letters like that all the time, when we see
Yeah.
language that starts at a 10.
Yeah.
We immediately get grumpy. We're like, yeah, no, you're not, no, we're not working with you at all, sorry.
You started at 10, there's nowhere to go from there.
In this, the harboring, I see the point, I mean, it is kind of like a 10, you know, maybe it should be a 7
I
or
become
something.
harboring when I don't address rest of this text. I'm not harboring up in the,
Yeah.
I'm not harboring yet.
I see where you're coming.
Folks that up.
Do we have an idea of how many buildings I mean, I keep hearing about the infamous hockey house. And I'm sure down with, probably some apartments down where Chad is, it might occasionally happen. I mean, how many buildings are we talking about? I mean, we're spending a lot of hours. Are we spending all these hours on hockey house?
I can
That's why
tell,
we're here?
I can tell you.
We
on
can
the
solve that
side,
really quick.
Part of the problem is it moves
Try to buy
around
it.
every year, right? So it's not always the same house. But it's 3 to 4 houses that are causing serious issues.
Is the one on the corner of Pond and Mainwood, is it, I mean, not Mainwood,
In North Main.
Hillside?
yeah, but there was one right down on the corner of Pond Street.
Oh, North 100, it used to be 100 North Main.
Yeah. Does that continue to be a problem?
That's not a problem right now that I know of,
No,
no.
because at one time that was huge.
Yeah,
That was huge.
that's the thing, is it does move around a bit from time
And
to time.
it was so bad when there was a man who bought the building who was cleaning things up and ran the buildings without problems like that. He had the town change the address because the address had become so
Synonymous with.
well known with
Yeah.
Party City. He said, can you change the street number of this so it no longer gets called? Yeah.
Around 90.
I just wondered if that's still
Like
historically.
Mount Manor.
I think the real answer, Dennis, is not many, but because we're gonna encourage the public to call, and right now they're not, it's gonna be larger. There'd be a larger, cause
I
I live downtown, so I know it is way more than they know about. Way more,
I'm just shocked.
times more than what you think.
So you live downtown?
I live downtown, and if you're encouraging the public to call, you'll get some calls. Cause there's 5 to 10 times more of these than probably PD gets made aware
I'm
of.
just shocked that a landlord would have 2 incidences that I hear reference to, the one in the fall, and one in the spring in the same building, and then re-rent to those people.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I mean, it goes
You
back
like
to,
problem?
right, they're not a local, they're an investor, they're a remote investor, and
They're just looking at the dollar sign.
yeah, it's easier to re-rent to somebody than to go get a new tenant, costs money to get a new tenant,
Yeah,
so.
but
It's a degree of luck.
Can you imagine, all right, this is what you're aware of that's going on in that building. I can tell you from experience, the inside of that building and just the other things that a landlord would have to deal with, I don't want. You know, the stuff that isn't a problem to you.
Yeah.
They have to fix inside.
Yeah, oh, yeah,
I mean,
I mean, these
I-
parties are not good for the property.
I ran into a group of hockey players years ago. That there were holes going in the vinyl floor in the kitchen. They're taking slap shots against the wall. I'm not dealing with that another year.
Yeah. Well, the investor in Portland was more than happy to deal with it for another year.
Yeah.
There's
Add it up.
Well, it's not.
certain degree of bad landlord, there's also a degree.
Yeah,
What's that look?
I never felt last year.
I said it's not super hard to fill housing last.
Did you make
right
that
now.
I never felt such a
Such a big
question. I had a couple of comments that were empty all year. No, I hear that.
They do,
I hear
right?
that.
Yeah, we were so full last year.
Yeah.
So there's certain degree.
How big is a freshman class? Just pretty big, right?
Yeah, but I don't know if we're over full on housing yet. So I haven't heard that report yet. I actually just asked the,
Enrollment up or down?
right now static,
Static.
yeah.
That's the new up though.
We haven't gotten any new reports. Nobody's unhappy right now.
Good. Exciting to welcome everybody.
Wait a minute, everyone will be unhappy.
Nice.
Well, yeah.
You should leave the
So I'm
country
not
for a while.
In the country, I'll just be.
Oh,
high.
yeah, I know.
Be very up high in the
All
country.
right, anything else? I mean, we could potentially be done a little early today. Anything else? Anybody want to walk through on this write-up?
Last one, section 20-60 penalties at the bottom, turning note. LP5,
Number what? Comment?
comment LP5,
Mhm.
page 6, bottom right. I was a little confused by this too. It's talking about civil penalty, person who's found to be in violation, putting all provisions, blah, 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 civil penalty of not less than 500, not more than 1,000. She seemed, attorney seemed a little confused. These align with the other fees in the other section, or are these completely different fees tied to something else? I wasn't clear on that when I read that. The civil penalty part.
Yeah, I read it as you're not complying with the disorderly, there's a disorderly activity.
Yep.
And then there's disorderly property.
Yep.
And I read that as not complying with the disorderly property provisions as opposed to the.
And this one is in a per incidence fee. This is the town has determined that you're not complying. We can charge you between $500 and $1,000 per day of non-compliance. Is that the idea?
If the landlord doesn't show up to remediate.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what that is.
It's a completely different type of enforcement penalty.
Yeah.
Got it.
I have a quick question for Lori. If a student, a UMaine student stays in Bangor at a campus party that's, they have an issue like, we have here in Orono, and you get a phone call from somebody in Bangor for contact, that still applies?
It could be in Florida.
Okay. Good to know.
The long arm.
Well, it's just if it has an effect on their enrollment or, you know, if it's related to them being a student, absolutely.
Does the university reach out only to the student, or do they also talk to parents or maybe whoever's paying tuition?
It depends on the situation. If there's, we have, I mean, FERPA has some loopholes in it where we can call parents.
Yeah.
My general rule is that if I'm on call and I get woken up, somebody else does too.
Yeah, good, I like that one. I'm thinking if you call the person paying the tuition.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
You're gonna get some fabulous.
It's funny, they still leave you out of calls and
Yeah.
information, and it's like an act
Right.
of Congress.
Well,
to
it's
get
not-
information. I'm like, paying the bill.
Right.
Give me this info.
yeah, and students can sign off on whether you can do that or not. I mean, we have a way of seeing that whether or not, if somebody has said you may not reach out to my
Right.
parents, then
Yeah.
then we absolutely would not. But it doesn't really matter who's
You're gonna
paying the
go-
bill at the end of the day. I mean, because they're adults
Right.
or they're of adult age.
My point being that if you're a parent and you're paying tuition, your feedback mechanism is when you see grades a year later, right? You see they flunked out and now you've just sunk 50 grand, whatever the number is, right?
Yeah.
If they have a quicker feedback mechanism to problems,
Yeah.
you may find the
Yeah.
problems go way quicker. The parent calls and be like, listen, I'm paying for you to get an education, I'm not paying for you to party.
Right.
So if you're partying, that's wonderful. I'm done writing checks. And well, no, I'll be good, Dad. Okay, great, thanks.
I mean, it just depends on the situation. When one of the fraternities closed down
Yeah.
not too long ago, we called every parent of the students who were living there because we knew that that was gonna create a housing situation.
Right,
And, you know, so that's kind of, in that situation, we could, and we told the students we were going to, and
Right.
nobody objected, and, you know, it was kind of trying to help that situation. It just depends. Sometimes we can't call
Yeah.
parents, but, you know, if we can, or if it's an emergency or.
and whoever pays the tuition, you have a relationship with them.
You'd be surprised that we can't.
Yeah, there's a lot we
get access
can't
to the
do.
grades, and we pay the tuition,
Yeah.
so they don't reach out and say, here are the grades.
Yeah,
You got leverage point.
Yeah.
Hey, if you don't give me access to your grades, I'm not paying your
But
tuition.
even with the FERPA release form, there's a lot we can't,
Really?
yeah.
Alright.
Are you guys able to, I was just gonna ask you, if the student goes on probation, are you guys able to track them and say if there was another party somewhere on campus, but here you say that that student was there, you guys are doing an investigation and stuff like that?
It kind of, it depends on the situation. A student, once they have a conduct record, we have a case management meeting weekly that you can see if somebody is like violating, their name keeps coming up, and if someone becomes a frequent flyer, then that's a good avenue for intervention.
Alright, I got, anything else on the ordinance? I got a question about, we get a fair amount of off-track questions, so I'm gonna ask one of my own. What happens if this is really successful and we create an expectation that, you know, not gonna have these large unruly gatherings in our residential neighborhoods, and particularly after 10 PM. And I get like after 10 PM is when things stop, you know, we want things to quiet down, you know, there are people that where's it gonna go? I mean, it's not, we're not gonna, we want people to be safe.
Right.
But we don't want these parties in our residential neighborhood. So where does that activity go?
I mean, that's a great question, because it's gonna go somewhere.
Mhm.
I mean, honestly, it's probably gonna go to the complexes. I hate to say it, but.
But isn't that what we kind of want is out of our neighborhoods and into the
Right.
complexes
Well,
where.
I mean, it depends, though, I guess I like to be optimistic and think that if there's, let's say there's some students in a neighborhood that are perpetually violating, and it does come through conduct as well as going through, the ordinance. I like to think that maybe even though we didn't really want to put tips training or anything like that in there, that we would do that. We
Yeah.
would kind of say, here, you're hosting, but you're not doing a great job. So maybe you could be better at it. And that's the kind of stuff what we do with the parties that we know about. It's like, let's have a conversation about how you can be a better host, still have parties, still do what you want to do, but maybe take some harm reduction approaches to do better. And I think that our student wellness office will probably be interested in doing some kind of postvention stuff if we start getting referrals like this.
Yeah, well, we speak about the hockey house. Does anything get swept underneath the rug where there might be a really good hockey player? That you get a phone call, hey, geez, and do you contact the coach, say, hey.
Oh, always.
Oh, it depends.
Yeah, at our case management meetings that we have, there's a representative from athletics, the assistant AD is there. Communication, if there's a athlete involved, no matter who they are, they're informed. And the coaches are very helpful.
Dennis
They don't
wants
want
Tim
that
Whitehead to
either.
come back. Dennis wants Tim Whitehead to come back.
You may stop some of these with this stuff.
Yeah.
I don't think they'll all move. I'll give you a reason why. People are here to invest in their education most, right? And you've now given landlords a really serious economic reason to start evicting or threatening to evict bad actors so that we don't get put on this list and we don't have all these fines. And every time I've explained to college tenants that their actions are this close to resulting in eviction, I also add, and in this modern world, when employers do background checks, they will see that you were evicted. They will see this went to court and they will
That's
see
right,
the reasons why. And welcome to, you're not getting the job.
Yeah.
Right? So understand that's the next step. Every time I have that conversation, the next step doesn't need to happen.
Yeah.
Right? And so the totality of all this may be enough to actually stop some of this stuff.
It'd be great to give landlords who are responsive and play a role in helping address behaviors, kind of a competitive advantage in terms of
Yeah, sure.
being a successful operator in the
Yep.
town of Orono. It's, Orono's a tough place to operate if you're gonna be a, unattentive, absentee, but if you're gonna be, a part of making our neighborhood a better place to live, this is a place where it's a good place to do business, so. So that's been very helpful feedback. In terms of meetings and next steps, I think staff has left the room, so we can talk about staff freely, right? But we've been recorded before, so I'm kidding. But, organizations focus on what leadership with the customers, right, of the town of Orono. And organization, they've got, a lot of things come up. And the organization will focus more on the things that are clearly a priority for the customers or the council or whatever. I think there's a role for this committee, this group. I think it's a two-way thing. I think continuing to have some sort of discussion continuing the discussion has a good impact in terms of it'll focus the energy and attention of the town and its resources. It'll also be a chance for us to go back and landlords get together, have cups of coffee. I don't know, whatever you're doing, whatever our communication is with the university. I like the idea that you're gonna go back to into the tough end and talk to people. Yeah, things are happening and this is what's going on. I like the idea that, Cynthia, you could do the same in your neighborhood and, I like that. And I like to have people involved in seeing a process is having an impact. So I'm definitely open to continuing to invest some of my time in these discussions moving forward. I think it'd be very helpful to see what happened with this ordinance change, how has the staff implemented it, what's been the response? And I think I'd like to think this committee would be a good kind of resource to oversee that. And I'm open to continue to meet, but I don't want to burden people with, definitely not weekly. Is it, once a quarter, something makes sense? What's the sense?
Quarterly gives you enough time to get reasonable feedback without a big investment of time,
So if we
just to take time to matriculate out to the world and actually affect stuff.
So like sometime in November, is that enough time? Should we do it earlier? So at least we see what kind of the beginning of the semester was like and.
I think if you do want anything to go out for messaging to students at the beginning of the year, then I'll need to know some of that stuff in August.
Yeah.
No later than mid-August, probably. And I know that's very soon, but
Incredible.
no, I know, but I mean, even just messaging.
Yeah.
Like, maybe some of the, maybe there's a message we could put together easily, I don't know. But if there's off-campus messaging we want to put out to students, then we can do it. I can do it in November too.
Yeah.
But
No, we want it as part of, we've got this Orono Festival Days and we're gonna be inviting people and celebrating. That's gonna be September 6th. So that's gonna be celebrating the start of the new year, welcoming people to Orono, introducing Orono to people. We don't want them to spend 9 months figuring out where the thrift store is or, those kinds of things and the resources we have in town.
and we have the week of welcome that first week, and we have the Student Orgs Fair, which is on the first Wednesday, where thousands of students come to the mall, and Rain Date Friday.
Yeah.
So if we wanted to do some information sharing at that thing, I mean, it's the best week to do that.
Yeah.
So
If we slow the traffic down enough on the bridge when we do the walking Orono.
there you go. That's gonna be a problem.
It's looking like it's almost done now, right? I think half of it done anyway.
So is this the last meeting?
So we have one more next Monday and
Okay.
but then we're gonna decide when will we meet and we can decide it next week, but I gotta get a sense of when. Yeah. I'm not.
November sounds good. You got a couple months to figure out how things are going.
So
That's just return.
Sometime in November, meet again? Is that what?
So, what about? Who's gonna come up with this communication piece? Are we putting that on staff? I take it.
It'll be staff will have to, we did some work on it. I gotta bring, I know that I was asked to do it, but I'm gonna spend some time with what we had in our meetings, come back with something.
Is that something we're
Basically.
gonna talk about or?
We'll talk about it next Monday. Yep. I'll put it in front of people.
Monday at 7:30.
No, not this time. I'll try, end of day Thursday. So if people have the weekend to look at it.
And remind me, I think we talked about two pieces, right? A more positive piece framing what a good neighbor is.
Yep.
And then a more detailed piece about, by the way, this piece of being a good neighbor is attached to these parts of the code with these part. No,
Yeah.
10 a.m.
$300 fines and 10
10
PM
p.m.
matters and,
Yeah,
kind of getting into the details.
yeah, exactly. But like an infographic type thing where, big, a lot of white space, maybe some
And with a focus too on the 866
4,000.
4,000.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
That's a
Right.
pretty key component.
it's gotta go to, residents as well as.
And it has to be, the content will have, it's a, it's a communication plan, and there'll have to be pieces of it, collateral, that we could create collateral that works for the university. We ought to get. I'd love to get an influence, so there's a UMaine football player who I find online, who's just does a great job, like Life at UMaine, and I'd love to find a relationship like that we could use, like introduce people to it, but that's a question for staff to.
NIL contract, we talking NIL contract?
Probably not that much, but probably some.
And we've done the door hanger things before for messaging in neighborhoods, and if that's something we wanted to do, I could get together a group of people to do that as well if we wanted to. So everybody gets the same message and you hang it on their door handle and.
Yep.
I'm sure the Webster side could rally volunteers to door hang for the whole neighborhood too.
Yeah.
I think it'd be great if ideally I think it comes together as an invitation to Orono Festival Days and, here's a scan code to, good neighbor stuff. All kind of, yeah, I don't wanna be like, it's not who we are,
What's the Orno Festival date again?
September 6th.
So is that the good time to message this stuff? Cause the students are kind of freshly back and.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cause I think, I mean, we'll see, hard to predict human behavior. I think there's a very good chance if you message it well and you message it around that time period, that you'll get calls in the beginning. And it will get people doing this stuff out of the habit of doing it because there's consequences quickly and early and they don't see their friends getting away with it. They don't see anybody getting away with it. And I think you could stop it before it gets going. I think once it's going, it's a lot harder to stop because people are like, they did one yesterday, who cares, right? Why are you picking on me? But if the whole town of Orono is serious about making these phone calls to just kind of kill it early, I think we could have a lot less of it.
And over time, people that wanna, have a more boisterous college experience, maybe are looking at different parts, places, I want people to be safe. I want them to have all the fun there is, but your right to happiness ends when you start disrupting my right to happiness. So,
I do think setting tone is key, but September 6th is actually pretty late to be setting tone.
Yeah.
The worst parties happen the last week in August before school starts.
it'll be the invite to the September 6th, which will be the, that's the, it comes with, it's a carrot and the stick or it's the sweet treat with the dog medicine, right? It's the, hey, come to this event. We're excited to have you in Orono, which we truly are. And it's why a lot of us live here, right? I mean, we do business here. I mean, I love living in a college town and I love the energy and all that goes with it. So. Great. Anything else for today? All right. Good stuff. Thank you. Yeah. You have a second?